don't invite them down here, to give the other teachers a chance to bring theirs down there. So just know somewhere up in my room right now, there are some students who feel that they've been slighted. So that's a good thing. You can laugh at them when you see them later. So we're gathered here today for Veterans Day, and a lot of people, there's a little confusion between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. On Memorial Day, we honor those who have died in service to the country. Veterans Day, which is Monday, November 11th, it's always November 11th, is to honor those who have served. Some of us have a different view of the military. Some of us feel that every person who's ever been in the military has served in combat and things like that. Fortunately, most don't serve in combat, but they serve nevertheless. So I just have a few thoughts about that as we start. We would all like to believe that we have made sacrifices, and in some ways we have all made sacrifices. Usually it seems that the older we get, the number of sacrifices we make increases. Likewise, as we get older, it seems that sacrifice becomes more significant, especially when it comes to our children. This, however, is not always the case. Men and women who have served in the military have sacrificed. They have sacrificed much. At the very least, some have sacrificed their bodies, some have sacrificed their minds, and they have sacrificed time spent with loved ones. They have sacrificed making plans and moving forward with their lives, while others have sacrificed everything. Think for a moment about your life at this moment. Some of you may be having some very positive thoughts. Some of you may be having mixed thoughts, while some of you may be having negative thoughts. Regardless of where your thoughts took you there are a certain amount of threads in all of your lives. First, your life is your own life. It's your own. There will soon come a time when you and you alone will be responsible for every action and every outcome in your life. Second, these actions and outcomes will go a long way in determining who you are, where you are going, and what you hope to be. And third, no matter who we are or what our station in life is, we all hope for a brighter future. Think about that for a few seconds. Think about what you want to become. For each person, that is something very real, very personal, and the focus of much time and energy. Now ask yourself if you would be willing to put all of that on the line. Ask yourself if you are willing to put all you know, all you care about, and all you wish for at risk. It is easy to look at the men and women seated in front of you and say, yeah, I would do that. However, the full weight of that decision and all of the consequences that go with it cannot be fully appreciated until you are actually faced with it. When that decision is directly in front of you, all of the things that you know, all of the people that you care about, and all of the things that you wish for somehow become more real and are seen in sharper focus. So I ask again, would you be willing to give up your life here? Not your life, but your life here. What you know, who you love, where you live, and leave it all. Put everything on hold for about 4 years at least, or maybe even longer. Let me add another question. How soon would you be willing to go? I hope these two questions made you think a little bit. However, there's maybe even another question. What are you willing to sacrifice for all of these things? What, if anything, is so important to you that you would be willing to give up your time, your body, your mind, and possibly your life? Most veterans understand, whether they're drafted or whether they enlist or whether they volunteer, that at some point their life could be placed in danger. You could be sent someplace where your life is in danger and you're in harm's way. Many of the sacrifices we make in the civilian world, particularly when we are young, are geared toward personal betterment. We study a bit harder to get better grades. We practice a bit more to get better on the field or on the court. We leave the comfort and safety of our home to attend college, to get an education, so we can hopefully forge a little bit better of a life. All of these sacrifices are admirable. In the end, however, they are sacrifices that we made, but they are also sacrifices made for ourselves. Each of America's veterans have made the decision to sacrifice for a set of ideals written down just over 240 years ago. Veterans have sacrificed for the safety and happiness of their families, their neighbors, their communities, and for total strangers. All of the questions that were posed to you earlier, the men and women in front of you answered with a resounding yes. Yes, I will sacrifice time with my family. Yes, I will sacrifice time with my friends. Yes, I will postpone my life. Yes, I will place my body in danger. Yes, I will place my mind in danger. And yes, I will do it all for other people. I've been teaching for nearly 27 years, and I've certainly heard my share of students who have said, I would do anything to get out of school, or any place is better than here. It's funny because I'm sure that most, if not all, of the panel members in front of you could tell you that you could not be more wrong with that thought. There are plenty of places worse than high school. Many of the people seated up here in front of you have been to some of those places. In 1953, a high school dropout still had a pretty good chance at a decent life. Times have certainly changed. So before any of you out here have delusions of grandeur, and some of you may have a wish to join the military, and you just want to get out of here and go, just remember that today's United States military, it does not accept any enlistees without at least a high school diploma. As we get older, it becomes apparent to most of us that the most precious source of wealth that we have is time. Time with our loved ones and time to do the things we most enjoy. By making the decision to serve, any veteran sacrifices this always diminishing source of wealth. No matter what we do, how much money we have, who we are, you cannot buy more time. There is just no way. There are some who will think that it's crazy to give up any part of this wealth of time that is constantly shrinking with each passing day. To answer those with that view, I offer you the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who once said, "The only wealth which you will keep forever is the wealth which you have given away." That's what all these people up on this panel have done. And as is our tradition here at Millbury High School, we'd like to give each veteran a few minutes to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their service, and after that we open it to questions. They really like to answer questions, so as you're sitting here listening to them, if you have any questions for them, I invite the teachers too. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and ask away. And I'd ask the veterans if we need to move mics so we can hear you better, we will do that. So if we want to, you want to start way down the other end, all right? Mr. Mulhane, could you start us off?
Okay. My name is Stuart Mulhane. I went to school here. I'm a lifelong resident of Millbury. I served in the U.S. Army, and I served during the Vietnam War. Now, a lot of you students aren't familiar with the Vietnam War. It was a large war. We were trying to protect North Vietnam from coming into South Vietnam. It was not our war. And there was a lot of problems with people accepting us serving over there for that reason. But to give you an idea, I was, my MOS is infantry. I served in Vietnam for a year. And when you talk about boots on the ground, that's what I did. To give you an idea how large the war was, everything over in Vietnam was helicopter. I never seen a vehicle over there the whole time I was there. Everything was helicopter. Now a sortie is when an aircraft goes out and comes back. In Vietnam, to give you an idea of the extent, and this is staggering to me also, but I do have a book out in my car that would prove it. A sortie is when you go out on a military action out and back, whether it be for supply, whether it be gunships, whether it be search, whether it be any other type of sortie that had to do with the military. The total sorties were, let's see. Trying to see where it is here. Well, I remember it. 36 million plus. I think we lost over there 266 helicopters in South Vietnam, the one we were protecting. In North Vietnam, we lost a little less. That gives you an idea of the extent of the Vietnam War. My MOS was infantry. I served on the ground in combat in Vietnam. I was wounded once. They brought me to a hospital. I spent 30 days recuperating. And then I went back out. I spent a year over there, and basically, when I came back, I had 6 months left, so I was an instructor for infantry until I was discharged 6 months later. Thank you.
Everybody hear me? My name is George Murphy. I've lived in Millbury for 15 years and love this town. And I joined after college. And I wanted to get into teaching like Mr. Polano, but unfortunately in those days, the schools were declining because the baby boomers were basically using birth control. And we used to have like, it wasn't not uncommon to have a family that had like 7 kids in it. And all of a sudden we get families with 1 or 2 kids. So they didn't need teachers then. So the Army was a good choice for me. I served in the Cold War. And what I did was they sent me for training in Arizona. And they knew I spoke German from college. So they put me into Germany, and I did liaison on the border area. Now, back then, you had West Germany and East Germany. The Russians were in East Germany. We were in West Germany, and there was like a border that was basically a wall, and with guard towers. And anytime anybody from East Germany who wanted to go into West Germany, try to get over, they get shot at, and many of them didn't make it. So it was my job to talk to people that did make it, and report any useful information up the chain of command. Later, I went to Fort Hood. I got involved with it's now Fort Cavazos in Texas, and I got involved with tanks. And I was in the very first battalion that fielded the M1 tank, the Abrams, and that was interesting. And then I went into the reserves, and I finished off in the reserves. But the main thing is the Cold War was like his generation, that they had the Vietnam War. My generation was in between, and basically we didn't see any hot combat like he saw, but just still, we had to be ready, and things were real. So, with that, this gentleman.
Okay. I'm overwhelmed. You guys, I can't believe this. You taking this kind of interest, and I think we have most of the football team here, don't we? Okay. My name is Ernie Bishop. I grew up in Auburn. Graduated from high school in Auburn in 1953. And from there, went to boot camp for 10 weeks. And then I was shipped, went to Chinook Air Force Base to school on jet engines. And from there, I just went from one base to another. What surprised me was during my time in the Air Force, I was selected to do classified information. So I went on a top secret mission, and we developed the first drone aircraft. I'm sure you've heard about drones. And today, I think like Amazon is using them to drop their packages off. But anyways, that was interesting. It's something I couldn't talk about to anyone. My parents, at that time I wasn't married, so I didn't have to worry about my wife. It was very interesting. I grew up, I was 18, 19 years old, didn't know diddly. So anyways, I'm overwhelmed that you guys are here. I guess that's about it. You take it from here?
How long were you in for?
I was in 4 years.
4 years, he was.
Yeah. And then I spent 3 in Air Force Reserves. So.
My name's John Nagelschmidt, and I grew up in Massachusetts, but a couple hours from here. I started looking at the military when I was in high school to pay for college and didn't join, and went to college and then joined the military. And I spent I graduated from college with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, so I became a nurse. So I spent my entire 20 years in the Navy as a Navy Nurse Corps officer. So I was an officer versus enlisted, so I had a little different lifestyle. I still remember in 1988 driving to Newport, Rhode Island, and parking my car in this big dirt parking lot and going into the building and getting yelled at because my car was in the wrong parking space, I was at the wrong check-in desk, everything I did was wrong. And in 6 weeks, we walked out doing pass and review with the Navy band as a bunch of nurses and doctors and lawyers, and we were on our way. If you've ever been to a hospital in Massachusetts, you know when you walk in, everybody has their own room. My first hospital room had 28 beds in it, a row on each side, 14 patients on each side, and I was the only nurse for all of them. So it was busy. I had helpers, at Hospital Corman, but it was busy. That was in Portsmouth, Virginia, across the river from Norfolk, the largest naval base in the world. From there, I was deployed to Saudi Arabia, where our hospital arrived just before we did in 100 of those big metal boxes that they load on trailer trucks. We had to unload it, build the tents, put the equipment in, so that we could be ready to take care of patients. To Naples, Italy. Whenever we have ships out in the Mediterranean Sea and in the Persian Gulf, if they have sick people, they would send them all back to us in Italy. We would take care of them and then send them back to the United States. To Newport, Rhode Island, Beaufort, South Carolina. Navy Healthcare takes care of the Marine Corps. There's a Marine Corps Air Station there, and Parris Island Recruit Training is there. Then to Jacksonville, Florida, and then I finished my career in the Navy in a little place called Iwakuni, Japan, about 45 minutes from Hiroshima, where we dropped the first nuclear bomb. It was, every time I moved, it was something different. Every 2 to 3 years, we were moving someplace. I have 3 daughters, which meant that every 2 or 3 years, they were changing schools and making new friends. Every 2 to 3 years, my wife was out hunting for a new job. I probably would not change anything. I enjoyed my time in the military, but it was a very unstable life for our family.
My turn. Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. My name is Brian Presley. I joined the Army National Guard in 2000. I graduated from Framingham High School in 2000 as well. When I first joined the National Guard, it was for national defense, natural disaster recovery, that kind of thing. So that's what I expected to be doing when I joined. But then about 1.5 years later, some people decided to fly some planes into some buildings, and everything changed. And so I had to mentally prepare myself for the thought of actually going to war, which I have to admit I did not want to do. Like I said, I joined just for national defense and natural disaster relief, but suddenly here I am having to be an actual soldier. I ended up going to Iraq in 2004, well, 20 years ago, geez. Ended up going to Iraq in 2004, coming back in 2005, and my son is somewhere in this building. He's in 8th grade now, and I remember a couple weeks ago, I was looking in his history book, and they were talking about 9/11, they were talking about the Iraq War, and it's so surreal having something that you experienced be in a history book now. It's just it's such a strange feeling to know that I was a part of history. And it's just something that you never really think about. If you are deciding to join, you have to think about what your part is in in the team, in the war, or, you know, like in history in general. So if you are considering joining, think very carefully about what you want to contribute to the cause and to your country. But like I said, thank you for being here, and passing the mic on.
Good morning, everybody. Is it working? Did you? All right. My name is Roger Collette, and I live in Millbury since 1975. But when I was a young man, 18 years old, the draft was out. So I joined the Navy. And when I was at boot camp in Chicago, they asked how many want to go volunteered for Vietnam. I raised my hand, so I know I was going to Vietnam. So everybody that raised their hand went to Vietnam, but there was a lot that didn't put their hand up. Those people went somewhere else. They probably ended up in Vietnam, but I went to Vietnam, and I went on an aircraft carrier, a CVA. That's a TAC aircraft carrier, the USS Intrepid, number 11. So I reported. I had boot camp, and then I came home for 30 days, and then I went right to the ship. And we did sea trials, and the Forrestal, another aircraft carrier, had a terrible fire on there, and 176 sailors were killed on that ship. And we had to replace that carrier. We only had so many carriers over in Vietnam. So they took turns coming back and forth. So we had to go sooner. And we were in Vietnam. When I left Norfolk, Virginia, we had 0 miles. And when I was on that, from the time I went on the Intrepid till I got off, when we came back from Vietnam, the ship went 100,000 miles. So that took a long time. It takes 2.5 months to get to Vietnam when you're on an aircraft carrier, because you got to stop and get fuel. We didn't have a nuclear aircraft carrier. We had oil. So everywhere we went, we had to get fuel. Got to the Philippines, and we stayed there for about a week, and then we went online. And when you go online in Vietnam, we go up and down our coast of Vietnam, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and whenever somebody was having trouble, the Marines were in trouble, or they were getting overrun, our ships, the pilots, I used to talk to the pilots, and they used to tell me if we were on a mission somewhere and we heard I lost my thought here. Broken Arrow. Their missions are changed. They go right to the place where they're being overrun by the VC. And that would be an automatic. You wouldn't have an officer telling you to do that. Every jet, anything that was flying, headed for wherever the Marines were having a problem, being overrun. And that's what they did on the ship, and they used to shoot down. Our ship shot down 2 MiG-21s. It's the best, two of them were shot down from our pilots. And we saved a lot of lives over there. And then we have 30 days on the line, and then 30 days, you have a week off, an R&R, and then go back out for another 30 days, and you did that for almost a year. And we went to Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, the Philippines. And then the best news we got on the ship was when we were leaving Vietnam. The captain said, "We're on our way home. Job well done." And then on the way home, we stopped in Australia for a week. Then after that, we went to New Zealand for a week. And then we went across the Pacific, which took a long time. And the next stop was Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. We had to get fuel to get back to Norfolk. And then I finished off my time in the Navy, and I got married 30 days after I left the Navy. I was going out with my girlfriend before, so she waited for me. The letters I got from home kept me going over there. And I spent a lot of time in the chapel. We had our own little chapel on the Intrepid. And I wasn't alone in there. There was a lot of us, and we had casualties. I thought aircraft carriers you wouldn't have casualties. You have casualties in Vietnam, everywhere you went. Walter Cronkite, you were all too young, but Walter Cronkite was on CBS every night telling how many Vietnam soldiers were killed. Every night he would tell us. And I'm glad I got back, and I'm glad with all my combat veterans here. Thank you.
I got lots of problems. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. My name's John Lannon. I was working in a shoe shop, and then I just bell one off. I punched out, went down and joined the Marines for 4 years, and left. I left on a train, a plane, a bus, and I went to Parris Island, South Carolina. Then after I graduated there, I went to Intensive Training Regiment, which is in North Carolina. Then I went to recon, which is really intense training. Helicopters, repelling, nighttime repelling out of mountains, all kinds of stuff. Rubber boat training, I did all that, demolition schools. Then I got transferred to California for desert training. Then I went to Oceanside, California, and joined the Navy, got on their ship. And they took us to Hawaii, where I trained for about a year, and very intensive training. I went to prisoner of war school, jungle warfare, every kind of school you can think of. And then we got on the ship and we went to Okinawa, where we all landed by helicopter. And then we left Okinawa after training there another month. We got back on the helicopters, went on the ship, and then one morning I woke up and everybody had to pick up all your gear, and you got on deck and you looked as far as you could see, ships, hundreds of ships. We got on the helicopter. My battalion landed in the mountains. Another battalion landed on the beach. Another battalion landed north. Pushed ourselves together, so every area was clear. Then I got transferred north of Da Nang, west, and there was no front lines. I was in combat every day for over 13 months. And then I was on patrol, and they said 204 6696. Just me. Report to the rear. Oop, I'm going home. So I made my journey backwards now, a long trip to get back home. And then in California, I was reassigned to Quantico, Virginia as a platoon sergeant, color guard, honor guard. I did all that kind of stuff. And I met my wife, and she would not join the Marines. So we waited till I got out and got married now 56 years. So that's it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roger DeRosier. I'm a lifelong member of, a lifelong resident of Millbury. I was a senior in college, and it was December 1st, 1969, and I won the lottery. It was a different kind of lottery than probably many of you are thinking about. There was a lottery for the draft. They needed soldiers to fight in the Vietnam War. So if your number, okay, of your birthday was drawn and it was less than 165, then you could expect to be drafted into the military. My number was number 91. So on that day, I knew that when I graduated from college that year, that the expectation was that I would get drafted. Now, my plans were to become a teacher. And so therefore, that was obviously going to be delayed. So I decided that maybe getting drafted and not knowing what my future was going to be, maybe I should investigate other branches of service and maybe have a better chance of avoiding a situation that maybe I didn't want to have. So I went to the Air Force, I went to the Navy, I went to the Army, Coast Guard, and I ended up enlisting for 4 years instead of 2 years, getting drafted into the Air Force. So after I graduated, I enlisted for the 4 years, thinking that, okay, at least I would have some determination. So I got to basic training in September of 1970. And 2 weeks into basic training, I found out that I was going to go to Vietnam. And the reason is because President Nixon, knowing that the war in Vietnam was an unpopular war and growing more and more unpopular, was something that he was trying to make a little bit, not necessarily less unpopular, but hopefully was going to manage to get us out of the war a little bit earlier. And what he had planned was a program called Vietnamization. And the program of Vietnamization was essentially turning the war over to the Vietnamese, therefore having less and less American forces there. How was he going to do that? He was going to teach the Vietnamese English so that they could use the weaponry and use, okay, some of the manuals that were there that would be easier for them, okay, to do so. Because I was a graduate of college and college graduate, those of us who were college graduates were now going to be teaching English in Vietnam. So that became my job once I was done with basic training. So after basic training, I went to a school for what today would be called ELL, and the Defense Language Institute were my teachers, and so we had an 8-week training in order to do that. While I was stateside, ironically, some of my first students were Iranian students. I had classes, okay, where I had Saudi Arabian students, Spanish students. One of my Saudi Arabian students was a prince, okay, who oftentimes missed classes, okay, on Mondays because he used to fly to Las Vegas, and so therefore he would always miss his classes because he, okay, could. But the bottom line was that was what we would be learning. So I came home 3 weeks, and then off I was to Vietnam. I taught most of the time, okay, while I was in Vietnam. I have to admit, I was pretty scared. I didn't have a clue, okay, what was going to be happening to me. I went to my classroom every day. I had my M14 with me. I put it in the corner of the room. I didn't know, okay, what my students were like, because the stories out there were, we didn't know if the difference between a Viet Cong and a regular, okay, student. So we had to carry our weaponry with us. So we had no idea, okay, what kind of students, okay, were in our classroom. I never had a difficulty whatsoever, but one never knows. The bottom line is my year was great. The last 3 weeks that I was in Vietnam, I was taken out of the classroom, and because I knew French, and that French was my minor in college, I was asked, okay, to translate the American English Standard Operating Procedures for the Army. I translated that with a major in the Army. In 3 weeks, we translated 250 pages for the Cambodian Army. By the time that was done, they asked me if I would stay an extra 6 months in Vietnam. I said I would, but the Air Force nixed it, and so therefore I had to come back, okay, to the United States. By that point, I was fine with my experience. I had really enjoyed my experience in Vietnam, as strange as that may seem, but I enjoyed the culture. I enjoyed, okay, the fact, okay, of the opportunity that I had had. I came back. I've completed my 4 years. I looked for a job. History teachers, okay, were a dime a dozen. So it was very difficult, okay, for me to find a job. But ironically, because I had a French minor, I was able to get a job. And how ironic was it to get that job? I ended up getting a job here at Millbury High School. I taught French here at Millbury High School for my first 6 years, and then I taught history here for the remainder of my 32 years. So you guys, okay, most of you, were born the year that I retired. So it was wonderful. I had a wonderful time teaching here at Millbury High.
Hi, I'm Terry Burke Dotson. I also, I went to first grade through 12th grade here in Millbury. And I went to college and I was a science teacher, phys ed teacher. And many of these men here, my friends, had already gone to Vietnam. And I remember what JFK had said to John Fitzgerald Kennedy had said to us, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I said, I can help. And so what I did is I enlisted. Now, I was 33 years in the military reserve, so I enlisted in the Army National Guard, and I chose to be a field medic. Now, a field medic does not, at that time, carry weapons. A field medic goes with the soldiers up to the front line and helps out anybody who gets into difficulty and gets them back to a safe place where they can be fixed, you know, repaired. So the EMT training is like, well, the field medic training is like an EMT on steroids. I mean, you really, we got pounded with education constantly, and really knew our stuff. But to pass as a field medic, what they did is they brought us out into the desert, Fort Bliss, which was loaded with snakes, and they had victims or wounded soldiers, quote, with moulage, which is like fake guts and broken bones and stuff on that they strapped on. And they made them lay out in the field, and it was our job to go out, find them, figure out what was wrong with them, stabilize them, and then drag them out so that we could get them onto a Jeep. But they made it a little bit more interesting. They fogged the whole area so you could not see that far in front of you. It was totally smoked. And then they told us, keep your head down because we're going to be shooting over your head. Okay. You know, so if you could not go into a smoked area with gunshots and explosions and get your fallen soldier and bring him out, then you didn't belong there. Okay, so you had to make a choice. Am I going to go in there, or am I not going to go in there? And so that was your final exam as a field medic. From there, I went into the Air Force Reserve, and I was a operating room technician and helped in physicals. And then from now, why did I do that? Because I was 45 days too old to get commissioned. And so I said, okay, then I'm going to enjoy my life. And field medics were really in high demand. So I went to the Navy Reserve, once again, as a field medic and an operating room technician. And the Marines had to get deployed, and they needed a doc, which meant a medical person, to give them their shots and fix their medical records and stuff like that, get them all squared away. So I went with them. And then after that, I had pretty much done everything medical that I could do. I used to write prescriptions and everything else. They give you the best training possible in the military. Absolutely the best training possible. There is no limit to how much you can learn when you get into the military, and I took advantage of it because I'm kind of a nerd anyway. And so then from there, I knew I was going to have to retire very, very soon, so I switched over to air transportation in the Air Force. Now, what does that mean? Well, that meant that that we would take we would take military soldiers, our military soldiers in, and you'd go to a computer, and you've been to an Air Force, you've been to a air terminal before, and you see the lady or the man in back of a computer, registering you on the plane. Well, it's kind of like the same thing, except you have a rifle on your back, a little different. And then we had to learn how to drive heavy equipment to load big cargo planes. So I was there, and my last deployment was in Bagram Air Force Base, Afghanistan. And we were there when the war was pretty hot, okay? And there at Bagram. And our responsibility would be to have the planes come in, get the passengers off the planes, and put new passengers on the planes. And we did this in the total dark. There were three of us women, ran the American the American terminal at night. So only 3 women until we got more people in. And at any rate, when these new people came in, I remember one day, there were a lot of explosions around us, or around the base. But I got to tell you also that there was a school building built off the base that we could see through the wire, and the school had no children in it. No children, no students. And that was because the bad guys kept the students from going to school. And I'm not sure exactly who built the school, because we were there with the Polish, the South Koreans. We lived with the South Koreans for a couple of days until our bunks were ready. The Australians were there. And there were other countries, but when you went through the South Korean part of the base, all you could smell was kimchi. So you always knew where you were, even in the dark, if you had to be walking around. But it was very, very difficult, because there was fighting going on around us. But we had to worry about the planes and the people getting on and off the planes. And so this one night, I remember, the explosions were really close. It was scary. I mean, it was absolutely scary. Right, I believe it. I mean, I lived it, and I would always say, God, please make me have enough courage that I don't shame my family. I did not want to shame my family. Okay, keep me strong. Well, at any rate, with all of these explosions going on and everything, the young kids, I call them kids, they were adults, but I mean, I was the oldest person there. Everybody looked like a kid to me. And so the kids, the soldiers, my helpers, right, came right in there, and my new recruits, and they were scared and they were shaking. Oh my, what are we gonna? And I said, hold it, hold it, hold it. Just stop right now. I said, we all have jobs to do. Our job is to get these people out of this terminal onto the plane before they hit the plane. We got to get the plane off the ground, okay? So I said, stop. This is our job. That noise out there, we can't do a thing about it. I said, that's somebody else's job. Now, you think about a football team. If everybody on that football team does their job the way they're supposed to, okay, that football team has a very, very good chance of winning. Everybody has to do their job to the best they can do. Now, here we are in the air terminal, and these young kids are flapping their arms up and down, and they're running around, and I stop. That's their job. They're going to take care of it. We can't do anything about it. So you've got to make a choice. You either flap your arms up and down and cry, or you get going and get your job done so we can get these people off the ground. Okay. You know, it was scary. It was scary, but we did it, and we got them off the ground. And that's what's important. And you're going to have to make choices like that yourself. You're going to have to choose at some point in your life, am I going to get scared and just hide under the blankets and not worry about this, or am I going to step up to the plate and do the right thing? Make the choice to do the right thing. We all have to make choices at one point in time. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, this is the part of the program where we allow you guys to ask questions. I had a question handed to me, and one of you can answer it, all of you can answer it. You guys have been here before, you know how this goes. The question was from Mr. Cunha, and his question for you guys was, if you could go back in time knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your high school self?
I didn't go to high school. I went to work. I didn't like school. Turned out, when I went in the Marines, that's all I did was go to school. So I got my high school diploma in the service, college. Everything was open for you to take courses, but I would join again. My brother joined, my uncle joined, so it's whatever.
Anybody else want to tackle that one, or?
I did.
Well, it isn't, my situation was in college, but my situation, okay, is I certainly would never have joined the military had I not, okay, been forced to do so because of the situation, okay, that occurred with the draft. However, okay, it changed me in so many ways because the opportunity that it gave me allowed me to see things about the world, about me as an individual, that I would not have had, because in looking back on me as a person at that time, I was so parochial, meaning I saw my world, okay, as limited. Whereas as a result of the opportunity of being in the military, I got to meet all kinds of people from all over the United States who were very different from me, and I had to learn and know, okay, their culture, how they lived, and I got to appreciate that in a way that I would not have been able to do and did not know and would not have known that quickly. And the same thing about going and traveling around the world. I went to Australia, I went to Hong Kong when I was in Vietnam. I went to different countries. I got to see and learn, okay, about other cultures in a way, okay, that I don't think I would have been able to know and appreciate that I did because of my experience. So even though I was looking at the world in a very limited scope, the opportunity that came out of my experience changed me completely.
Anybody else? I don't want to cut anybody off. No? Does anybody have a question for the veterans? Go ahead, John.
Just for any of you, why did you choose that specific branch they went into?
Could all of you hear that? The question was, why did you choose the specific branch that you joined?
My brother was younger than me, and he joined the Navy. And when he was telling me, when he come back from boot camp and he went on his deployment, he was in a P-3. A P-3 is a secret aircraft, four-engine, propeller engine aircraft that looks for submarines, and it's a spy plane. And he was saying that the Vietnam War is getting really bad everywhere. They had all this information, and he says, you should join the Navy. You like the Navy better than, I don't want to, I'd rather ride on the ship, and when I was on the Intrepid, my job was handling 500-pound bombs and 1,000-pound bombs. They stack them up in a room like this, a room just like this, as many as you can put in there, and everything had to be picked up with a chain fall, one at a time. And that's what I did the whole time I was in Vietnam. But I worked like 12 hours, and then you have 12 hours off. There was 3,500 of us, so half the ship would sleep, and the other half would be working. And then after your shift is over, now you don't do bombs for 12 hours. They only go out on a mission, they might need 90 bombs. So you got another couple hours to rest. That's all I did though, nothing else. Then another mission, and then I would be off work at 10 o'clock at night. I would start at 11 o'clock at night and work till 11 o'clock in the morning. And then when after 30 days, you come back to port, and then your time switches. You don't start at 11 o'clock. You start at 11 o'clock in the morning. So everybody changed. So everybody got a chance to work nights and days, you know? And when I was in Vietnam, my brother was on a P-3, and he flew over the Intrepid. He was near Vietnam too. He was Thailand, I think. They had a base there, based out of Hawaii. He was based in Hawaii. And he asked the captain of his plane, the P-3, to call the captain of the Intrepid. And the captain of the Intrepid says, we're going to be recovering aircraft. We can't have Mr. Collette, Seaman Collette, talk to his brother on the plane. So the captain said, but I found out about this later, you know, when I talked to my brother. But the captain said, we got incoming aircraft. We don't have time to talk. But that was a true story if I knew that, I would have went up on the flight deck and waved to him, waved to my brother. He was 1,000 feet above me. But that didn't happen.
The reason I was in the U.S. Army was because I was drafted. My country asked me to serve in the U.S. Army in Vietnam. I did so, and I don't regret anything.
I was already a teacher. I already had my college degree. I could have gone in as an officer, but I wanted to know why these guys from Vietnam were all messed up. And I said, well, the only way to really know that, since I had made the decision to serve my country, was to go in as an enlisted person. And then when I tried to get commission, I was 45 days too old. And I was 10 times smarter than my husband, who was an officer. So that really got me upset. But anyway, so I said, well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try all the branches I can. So I studied up, made it to E7, and then switched to another branch and kept my rate. Everybody needed field medics and everybody needed operating room technicians. So I had no problem. They scooped me up. So I was in the Army National Guard, the Air Force Reserve, the Navy Reserve, and the Navy attached me to the Marine Corps because they couldn't go out without a dock. Why? Because I loved it, and I wanted to know what was the difference. And at the time, I guess I was working in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Transportation, and for some reason could not get into the Coast Guard. Otherwise, I would have had all 5 branches. But if you really love something and you feel like you're doing something worthwhile, the commitment is meaningless. It's just automatically done. And when I had to retire, it was like I got cut in half, because everything I was able to do for my country, I was a trainer, suddenly stopped. And it was difficult for me to leave the military, but I loved it. If you love something, it's not difficult.
So when I was a senior in college, I started looking at the military. My best friend was joining the Air Force Nurse Corps. The Air Force would not take me because I was decimal points away from what they considered a minimum GPA. The Navy and the Army would take me. The Army was offering me these great places to go live, the middle of Kansas, the middle of Nebraska. The Navy offered me Charleston, South Carolina, Norfolk, Virginia, and San Francisco. I was 6 months married, and my wife said, I'll go to one of those places. I'm not going to Kansas. So I joined the Navy for 3 years and stayed for 20. But the message from that, and also the message from Terry down the end, she was scooped up by all those branches because she was good at what she did. I couldn't get the choice I really wanted because it didn't matter how good I was, on paper I wasn't that good. So do your best every day, because sometimes those decimal points on a grade matter.
Abdul, you had a question?
I was going to add a question for the medics. What would you say the most occurring injury was?
There's a question for the medics. What was the highest occurring injury that you treated, if you had to pick one?
So when I was in Saudi Arabia in war, our biggest injuries in Operation Desert Shield and Storm were accidents related to the equipment that the Army and Marines were using in the field. We had these great-looking big Humvees, and they would drive them through the sand, and they would roll over on the side of a sand dune and crush the people inside. We had a lot of head injuries, a lot of orthopedic injuries. Throughout my years in the military, it was probably a lot of industrial-type accidents. Like Mr. Collette said, a lot of people, they had injuries on the aircraft carrier, but it's from working with all that equipment, not always from people getting shot. Much more industrial injuries and accidents.
Right, and and once again, it's basically the injuries, because by the time I finished my training, Vietnam had ended, and I was asked to get ready to deploy to Kosovo and all the rest of these other places, and Iraq and all that stuff, and the wars would end before I actually got off and into the action. So I spent a lot of time in surgeries. Well, the guys coming back from Vietnam, we had to do a lot of repair surgeries, but for the rest of the time, it was mostly accidents. Like, we had to do, I don't have to get into a lot of the things, but we had to do some amputations for accidents. We had to do some nerve repair. I remember one fellow tried to go through a glass door, and it didn't work. And so he had a real gash, and I was supposed to be threading the needles, and the needles for the nerves were so small that I said to the doctor had, what do they call it, you know, when they're looking through, what do they call those things? Magnifying glass. Anyway, and he said, well, give me the needle. I says, I can't see it. So he had to thread his own needles. But if you ever see a scar, if you see a scar, it's like shiny skin. And that's because if you cut a cell in half, it tries to find its other piece and it sends out fingers like this. So these fingers try to find each other to join up again, and that's why you have kind of like a shiny skin. It's not the same. It's skin, but it's not the same because they try to find each other. And nerves will do the same thing, and that's why he had to catch the nerve on this man's face before it receded, because a nerve strand will start pulling away. And so he had to find it and catch that nerve and sew it back together again right away. So, I mean, it was, the surgeries were really basically accidents, you know. Thank you.
Any other questions out there? Oh, you have another one, okay. And Corey, then we'll get to you.
What was like the longest mission you've had to, like the longest mission you had to go for, and how long did it last?
What was the longest mission? If you were deployed on a specific mission, what was the longest one you had? What was the longest mission that you were deployed on?
I was in combat for 13 months. Landed in the jungle from a helicopter so thick, they dropped shotguns. We had shotguns. Can you imagine it? Then the next day they took them and we broke out. But you gotta understand, I never saw an Army man. I never saw a Navy man. Air Force person. We were all in our own sections. I was a Marine. And I was always in the front line. So I don't know what they did. You know, you can never serve each other. The only time you got if you had a squad more than 14 men, they would attach a corpsman. Priceless. He was priceless. Oh, they have a corpsman. He would handle all the wounded if he could, you know. But it's not, you gotta understand, this war went on and on. You know, couldn't win it. And, not good. So, as it went on and on and on, I believe, seeing my own Marines, they got less training. And it was easy.
The longest mission I was on, Vietnam, was from the time I got there until the time I left. It was all the same thing, every day and every night. And the only time we had off was we did get an R&R, rest and relaxation for a week, and we also got, we could take our leave for a week. For the leave, I went to Hong Kong. They used commercial flights to get us there. And for my R&R, I went to Thailand for my R&R, same thing. But it was 12 months, except for those 2 weeks.
When I was in Germany, they have every year a thing called Reforger. Basically, the units were in what they call Kasernes, that's a German word for a barracks, and they would get out of the barracks with their tanks and all their heavy equipment and deploy to where they thought they would be meeting the Russians if we went to war. And that usually lasted about 3 weeks. And so that's my experience anyhow. In a Cold War, when it was more peace, you know, it was more like peace rather than when Vietnam, where every day was hell, so.
My longest mission would be the time I spent negotiating with the military regarding the classified information that we had in developing the drone aircraft. And at that time, I was the crew chief on jet fighters, and that was part of my responsibility to not let all this information leak out. So that lasted about 14 months. And to this day, I don't talk about it, quite frankly. because that's old news now. Drone aircraft, no big deal. They're all over the place. That's it. Go Woolies.
My time in the Navy, from the time I went on the ship, it's a little different with the Navy and the Marines, and their time starts in Vietnam. But the Intrepid, when it came back from Vietnam, when I went on it, I had to wait for the ship to come in. But on the ship, we had so many men that their time was done. Their 4 years is done, and they want to go home. And you could do that. So when I got on board, I'm new. I don't even know where the men's room is yet. So they would have to go out for like 4 months with the new pilots too, because pilots get transferred and go all over. But the same with the new crew. They just can't go to Vietnam the next day, you know, or a month later. They have to go out and sea trials for. So when I got through with my time in the Navy, I had 1 year, 8 months, and 14 days of sea duty, which I did not see my girlfriend. It was pretty tough, in my family. But this is what a sacrifice is, because when you're on an aircraft carrier, wherever they go, and you see it right on TV now, some of these big carriers, they're gone for a year and a half, a year. You just don't come back, and if there's something going on in the world, you go there. But you gotta be trained. And before we went to Vietnam, we were all trained pretty good. So now when the real test comes when you're in Vietnam, to see what it's like to do it for real.
Do you have any rats?
No, but I had 1 year, 8 months, and 14 days sea duty.
What kind of stories we tell?
And everybody on the Intrepid had it too, same thing. We were all together.
We can finish if you want with Corey.
I had a quick question. The lady on the end when she was talking, she said she was 45 days late for commission. What does that mean?
Do you want to answer that one? You said you were 45 days too old to be commissioned.
Congress, in its wisdom, put through a new law called DOPMA, which meant you had to be certified before the age of, we had to be certified at 33, but not after 34. Okay, and I had done everything I needed to do. I mean, you have to give them a book of all your qualifications in order to go before the commissioning board. And I had all of that done. I had my schools done, everything in June. And the 45 days after I completed all my stuff, and I don't remember exactly the date, DOTMA came into effect, and I had turned 34 in August. And they said, "So sorry," right? And they would not commission me. And believe me, I wrote to every congressman on earth, and nobody would reverse that decision. So, and I was 10 times smarter than my husband, who was an officer, and I could not get commissioned. And at that time, I had an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree. But I was 45 days too old.
So if
Go
you look at it
figure.
that way, Corey, the difference being is there are enlisted people and there are officers in the military. The officers are the ones in charge of stuff, you know, that kind of thing. So your enlisted ranks would be private, corporal, lance corporal if you're a Marine, senior airman if you're in the Air Force, sergeant, tech sergeant, all those ranks, where you have stripes on your sleeves. And the officers usually have jewelry on their shoulders, but they're the ones who run things. So when you receive a commission, that's what that is. It's a higher rank. Does anybody else? I lied. Maybe that doesn't have to be the last one. Anybody else have a question? And I know you're all very anxious to get back to D Block. Yeah, I can tell. I can tell.
Lot of
I'll
rats.
finish with this, if you guys want to say this. If you could give, because these guys are in high school, they're where you were just before you went into the military. One piece of short advice you would give them, if you could.
Well, you better be mature, and you better have good friends who are mature, and people that you can trust. that makes it a lot easier, and if you have higher, your leaders are good, mentors, you'll do all right, but there's always bad guys out there. So maturity is definitely good.
Anybody else?
I would say take care of your mental health. Like, make sure that you are, you have a good support system. Make sure that you have people that you can go to if you need help with anything.
Don't share your water.
Don't try to tough it out yourself. Like, don't try to be tough or, a loner or, like, think that you have to do everything. Don't carry the world on your shoulders. Make sure that you have people who can help you carry whatever load that you have. So that's my advice.
I would say, once you call a military recruiter and they now have your name and phone number, they work on a quota system. And they will keep calling you, and they will promise you the world, but if it's not in writing, don't believe them. And the last piece is, once you sign your name on those enlistment papers, there is no going back. There's no changing your mind and having your mom and dad go down and get the paperwork back. You have signed as an 18-year-old adult, and you're going.
Military
So
justice.
be careful.
Continue with your schooling. Pick out a good college. That's the way to do it. You're better off going to college than joining the service. I mean, it's not a bad life, believe me. I enjoyed my 4 years. And it was an education, it really was. And I got my college degree going nights, which is a hard way of doing it, but that's the way it was. It's a matter of economics. So my folks couldn't afford that. But I got my college degree on GI Bill, so it has its advantages. God bless you guys. And the teachers back there, thank you for your help. Very supportive.
All right, so guys, as we close today, obviously Monday is Veterans Day, and if you have a veteran in your family, be sure to thank them. Our veterans are unique in some places as opposed to other places in the world. They don't want parades, and they don't want medals, and they don't want any of that usually. A kind thank you is all it takes. If you know a veteran, don't be afraid to approach them and just give a quick thank you. It only takes a few seconds to think about, what they've given and what they've sacrificed. So if we could, before we leave, could we give these guys and girls a nice round of applause? And now get back to D Block, hurry up.
What? Don't share your